I had just cast my line into the glassy lake behind my cabin when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of high heels crunching on gravel, fast and angry. I didn't even need to look. That staccato rhythm only belonged to one person. "Excuse me," came the nasal shriek from behind me. I sighed, reeled in my line, and turned around. There she was, Naomi Ellerton. The HOA's self-appointed queen, clipboard clutched to her chest like it was a badge of honor, hair sprayed into a helmet, and sunglasses that screamed intimidation attempt. "You can't fish here," she snapped, jabbing a finger toward the water like it offended her personally. I looked past her, toward the dock that I rebuilt myself last summer, the same dock that sat at the edge of my private lakefront property tucked inside an upscale reed. Snobby cabin community. "Pretty sure I can," I said, keeping my voice calm. Naomi huffed. "This lake is for residents only. You're trespassing on HOA-managed space, and fishing is not allowed from community docks." I stared at her, genuinely confused. "This is my dock." She narrowed her eyes. "Then where's your resident badge? All residents must display HOA credentials while using common property." "If you don't have it, I'm issuing a fine," I laughed. "You're serious?" Her lips curled into a tight smile. "I'm always serious when it comes to enforcing our rules. You'll be receiving a citation for unauthorized use of HOA amenities and failure to display identification." "That's a $200 fine." I let the reel drop to my side and wiped my hand on my jeans. "Naomi, is it? From the HOA? I'm the community standards chairwoman," she said with pride. "Well, Naomi, I didn't think I needed a badge on my own property. You see, I own this cabin." "My name's Dorian Rusk. Just closed on it 2 weeks ago." The color drained from her face faster than a boat leaving a storm. "You own that cabin?" "Yep," I said, pulling out my wallet and flipping to the deed copy I always kept on me. "Want to see the paperwork?" She took a step back, blinking rapidly. We weren't notified of any ownership changes." "Apparently not," I said, smiling now, "which probably means I'm also a member of your little HOA." She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "Well, we still have rules, which I'll gladly help enforce," I interrupted, stepping off my dock and onto the grass. "Now that I'm a full-fledged member, I'd love to take a closer look at how things are run around here." She clutched her clipboard tighter. "This is highly irregular." "Is it?" I asked. "Or is it just inconvenient for you?" Naomi spun on her heel and stormed off without another word, her heels digging little angry holes into the earth with each step. I watched her go, already planning my next move. Because if Naomi thought she could find me for standing on my own land, I had a feeling this HOA was hiding a lot worse. And now, I had a front row seat. The next morning, I walked into the HOA office with a thermos of black coffee and a folder tucked under my arm. The office was wedged into the bottom floor of the clubhouse, a building that looked more like a rustic hunting lodge than a place where petty tyrants filed paperwork. Inside, the scent of pine cleaner clung to the walls, and behind a U-shaped desk sat a man in a tan cardigan, pecking at a keyboard like it owed him money. "Morning," I said, stepping up to the counter. He looked up slowly, blinking behind horn-rimmed glasses. "Can I help you?" His voice was thin, unsure. "Name's Dorian Rusk. I just bought lot 17, figured it's time to get up to speed on my new responsibilities. You got copies of the bylaws, financial records, meeting minutes, stuff like that." The man hesitated. "That's not something we normally just hand out." I leaned on the counter. "You do realize they're public within the HOA, right? I'm a voting member now. I'd like to review what exactly I'm paying into." He shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. "You'll need to submit a written request, and then it has to be approved by the board." I set the folder on the counter and opened it slowly. "Already submitted. Certified mail, delivered yesterday morning. Under Article 5, Section 12, you've got 72 hours to produce all non-confidential records. I'll wait." His jaw twitched. "I'll see what I can do." He disappeared behind a half-closed door. I could hear muffled murmurs, one of which was unmistakably Naomi's. Her voice had a way of curling around corners. A few minutes later, she burst out of the back like a hornet in human form. You can't just demand records without going through proper channels. Already did, I said, sipping my coffee. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You're new here. Don't make enemies before you make friends. I make friends by knowing how things work, I said. Not by pretending everything's fine when it's not. She glanced at the man behind the desk, who was now flipping through a thick binder with trembling fingers. Fine, she snapped. You want records. We'll give you records, but don't say we didn't warn you. I took the binder, nodded, and walked out without another word. Back at the cabin, I spread everything across my dining table. I wasn't looking for drama, I just wanted to understand what kind of neighborhood I'd stepped into. But the deeper I dug, the more it didn't sit right. For one, the financials were a mess. The HOA collected nearly $500,000 a year in dues, but only a fraction of that went to maintenance. The roads were full of potholes, the shared dock had rotting boards, and the so-called security cameras hadn't worked in years. Yet somehow, $20,000 went annually to administrative consulting. That name was repeated across several expense lines. Always tied to the same contractor, Elsie Property Solutions. I ran a quick Secretary of State business lookup. Elsie didn't exist. No business license, no website, no tax ID, but the registered mailing address. That was Naomi's home. I sat back in my chair, heart thudding. She was funneling HOA money into a fake company registered to herself. I pulled out my phone and snapped photos of the pages. Then I started digging into the meeting minutes. Half the decisions weren't even voted on by the board, they were emergency actions signed solely by Naomi. Landscaping contracts, capital improvement funds, even legal retainers. All rubber stamped by her signature. I picked up the phone and dialed a friend of mine, Detective Cass Jensen. We served together in the Marines years ago, and he'd gone into white-collar crimes not long after. Cass, I said. How much trouble is someone in if they're using HOA funds to pay a fake company registered in their name? He whistled. If it crosses state lines or involves wire transfers, that's federal. Mail fraud, embezzlement, maybe even racketeering depending on how deep it goes. You sit on proof, enough to get a U.S. attorney interested. Don't go public yet, let me make a call. By nightfall, I'd emailed him everything, scans, timestamps, even the original fine Naomi tried to hit me with. Cass promised to loop in some folks he knew in financial crimes at the county level. The next morning I got a visit, not from Cass. From a man in a charcoal blazer and loafers that cost more than my outboard motor. He introduced himself as Brent Keller, the HOA president. I think we got off on the wrong foot, he said, stepping up onto my porch without waiting for permission. I didn't realize we were on any foot, I said, not offering a chair. Brent gave a tight-lipped grin. Naomi mentioned a misunderstanding. I wanted to assure you that we take member satisfaction seriously. Satisfaction, that what you call this? I held up the binder. Financial irregularities, phantom companies, forged board decisions. His eyes flicked to the binder. You're misinterpreting things. I know how to read, I said. And I know how to file complaints. He shifted his weight. Look, we can correct any errors. No need to escalate this. Maybe waive your dues this year, let you make some improvements to your property without permits. There it was. The bribe. I'm not interested in hush perks. It's not hush, he said quickly. It's just smoothing out a rough start. This community's built on cooperation. I stepped closer. Tell Naomi the next time someone tries to buy me off, they'd better bring a lawyer because they're going to need one. He held my gaze for a few seconds. Then he nodded once, turned, and walked back to his car. That was the last casual visit I got. By the end of the week, two things had happened. First, Cass called to confirm that the county sheriff's department had opened a formal financial fraud investigation. Second, I received a letter taped to my door, no stamp, no envelope, just a folded piece of paper. Effective immediately, Dorian Rusk is suspended from community meetings and activities pending review of disruptive behavior. I laughed out loud. They were trying to freeze me out, but they'd already made one mistake too many. I called Cass back. "I want to go public," I said. "If they're going to try to silence me, I want the whole community to see what they're hiding." "You sure?" he asked. "Once it's out, they'll fight dirty." "Good," I said. "I'm done fishing alone." I set the letter down beside my coffee and stared out the window toward the lake, where mist still clung to the glassy surface. It was early, just past 6, and the only sounds were distant woodpeckers and the occasional splash of a trout. The letter's wording had been careful, clearly drafted by someone with just enough legal knowledge to avoid direct liability. But it didn't matter. What they'd tried to do was illegal, suspending a homeowner from meetings without due process. I'd handled more delicate constitutional issues in a war zone. I grabbed my phone and dialed. "County Clerk's office," came a cheerful voice on the other end. "Morning," I said. "I need to file a formal HOA complaint and request an emergency hearing before the Property Oversight Committee." The woman paused. "Are you alleging financial misconduct or procedural violations?" "Both," I said, "and I've got documentation." She gave me a time slot for Thursday morning. I thanked her, hung up, and then got to work. I wasn't interested in creating a scene. I wanted a record. Something that couldn't be buried under HOA newsletters and phony community updates. By mid-morning, I'd compiled a full dossier. 32 pages of evidence, complete with notarized copies of financial statements, verified corporate records, and a timeline cross-referencing Naomi's unilateral decisions with the fake invoices issued by LC Property Solutions. I also added a sworn affidavit from a neighbor I'd met days earlier, Brenda, a retired accountant who had noticed her dues had doubled in just 3 years, despite no visible improvements to the neighborhood. I printed 3 copies and sealed them in labeled folders. Then I walked 2 cabins down and knocked. Brenda opened the door with a curious look. "You're up early." "I need your help," I said. "You said you kept old budget records from past years." She nodded. "I've got everything since I moved in." "Why?" "Because I'm bringing this to the County Oversight Board, and I want someone else there who understands numbers better than I do." Her eyes lit up. "I was hoping someone would take those crooks on." "I'm not just taking them on," I said. "I'm going to dismantle their operation." She invited me in and brought out a meticulously organized binder filled with annotated budgets and handwritten notes. We compared line items for the past 5 years. The pattern was clear: gradual inflations, padded fees, and recurring payments to vendors with no online presence and no verifiable licensing. Naomi had set up a shell game, and no one had looked close enough to catch it, until now. That afternoon, I received a call from Cass. "You stirred something," he said. "The sheriff's department got an anonymous tip about a fire hazard at your cabin. Funny thing is, the responding officer said your place was cleaner than most of the department break rooms. They're trying to intimidate me." "They're panicking," Cass said. "And they should be. We subpoenaed Naomi's bank records. Funds from HOA accounts were deposited into Elsie's account, then transferred to a private investment account in her name. She's been laundering the money." I sat down slowly. "How much?" "We're still tallying, but it's well north of 200,000, I exhaled. "That's enough for felony charges." "It gets better," he said. "We have an email chain between her and the HOA president." He knew. My pulse ticked up. "So we're talking conspiracy." "Yep. And wire fraud, because some of the payments were processed through online transfers across state lines. That makes it federal. Are you looping in the feds?" "Already have. IRS Criminal Investigations is interested. So is the U.S. Attorney's Office. But don't confront them yet. Let this build." I hung up and stared at the lake again. The water was still calm, but under the surface something was shifting. That evening I attended the HOA's monthly board meeting. The clubhouse was packed, more than I'd seen since I moved in. Word had spread. Residents whispered in low tones as I walked in, some nodding in quiet support, others avoiding eye contact. Naomi sat at the head of the table, flanked by Brent and two other board members. All of them wore matching navy polo shirts with the HOA logo stitched on the breast. A subtle attempt at authority. The meeting opened with the usual drivel landscaping bids, noise complaints, discussion of a new security initiative. Then Naomi cleared her throat. Before we continue, I'd like to address some recent disruptions. It's come to our attention that a new resident has been spreading false accusations and attempting to obtain sensitive documents under false pretenses. I raised my hand. Naomi ignored it. We want to remind all residents that the HOA operates under a charter ratified by the majority, and our actions are in compliance with that charter. Any attempts to sow discord will be dealt with accordingly. I stood. You can't suppress a homeowner's right to review financial records. That's state law, Brent interjected. Mr. Rusk, this is a private meeting. It's public to all dues-paying members, which I am. Naomi leaned forward. You were suspended pending review. I pulled a printed copy of the HOA charter from my folder and held it up. There's no clause allowing suspension of voting rights or meeting attendance without a formal hearing and a 2/3 board vote. You skipped both. Murmurs rippled through the room. I continued. I've already filed a complaint with the Property Oversight Committee. You'll be receiving a summons, and you may want to lawyer up. Brent's jaw clenched. Are you threatening us? No, I said. I'm warning the people behind you. Because when this becomes public record, every homeowner here will know where their money went. Naomi snatched her gavel the first time I'd seen her use it and banged it on the table. This meeting is adjourned, but no one moved. A man near the back stood up. Where did our dues go, Naomi? Another woman. Why did security cameras still not work after we approved the budget for replacements? Voices rose in chorus. The board members looked at each other, pale and rigid. I left before the shouting started. I'd done what I came to do. The next morning, I received a call from a local reporter. Someone had leaked the documents. You're the homeowner who filed the complaint, she asked. I am, I said. Would you be willing to go on record? I paused. I'll do better, I said. Come by the cabin. I'll show you everything. She arrived that afternoon with a cameraman and a notepad, and I walked her through the timeline from the phishing fine to the fake company. She was sharp, asked the right questions, and left with a USB drive containing all the evidence. That evening, the story ran as the lead on the 6 o'clock news. The headline was brutal. Lakeview HOA under investigation, funds funneled to board members' private account. By sunrise, the neighborhood group chat was ablaze. Several residents demanded an emergency election. Others posted their own complaints, construction contracts that never materialized, fines that were never explained, landscaping that was paid for twice. Brenda called me just after dawn. They're done, she said. Brent's house had a for sale sign on the lawn this morning. Naomi hasn't been seen since yesterday. I walked down to the lake and cast a line. Behind me, the neighborhood was waking up to a new reality. And this time, no one was going to find me for enjoying my own dock. The following week, the air around the neighborhood felt different, charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. Nobody waved from their porches anymore. Most people just stared as I walked past, some with quiet nods of approval, others with tight faces that couldn't decide if I was the villain or the guy who'd finally turned the light on in a room full of cockroaches. I didn't care much either way. I was focused on the next move. The Property Oversight Committee had fast-tracked the hearing. They were bringing in a state compliance auditor, someone from the Attorney General's office, and because of the amount of money in question, a federal forensic accountant. Cass had told me in confidence that the feds weren't just reviewing the HOA's books anymore. They were looking into possible mortgage fraud, too. Apparently, Naomi had used financial statements from the HOA's reserve fund. Funds she knew were inflated to secure a personal loan on a second property out of state. That was a whole different kind of crime. The hearing was scheduled in the county administrative building, a place with flickering fluorescents and plastic seats bolted to the floor. Brenda met me at the entrance, holding a manila envelope with a quiet grip. She wore a navy blazer with a gold pin on the lapel, something her late husband had left her from his union days. It made her look like someone who'd never flinch in a negotiation. We weren't the only ones there. At least 50 residents had shown up, some still in work boots, one guy in scrubs, a few retirees with stacks of paperwork balanced on their knees. A woman from the AG's office called the meeting to order, and within minutes, the mood in the room turned from tense curiosity to stunned disbelief. The forensic accountant, a soft-spoken man with horn-rimmed glasses and a stack of spreadsheets, laid it out in plain terms. Over the past 5 years, more than $230,000 had been misappropriated through a series of shell vendors, all funneled through Elsie Property Solutions. The company had no tax filings, no payroll history, and no physical presence. Then came the kicker. Further investigation revealed that Miss Ellerton authorized payments to multiple contractors without board approval. These contractors do not exist. The funds were deposited directly into accounts linked to her personal trust and a secondary LLC registered under her maiden name, he said. Gasps erupted from the crowd. One man dropped his binder on the floor, papers scattering. The AG rep raised her voice slightly. Additionally, Mr. Keller, the sitting HOA president, approved retroactive reimbursements and signed off on fabricated invoices, several of which appear to have been created using a document editor and backdated. That's document falsification. Potentially a felony. Brent Keller, sitting across the room in a blazer 3 sizes too tight, said nothing. His face was pale, his hands clenched in his lap. Naomi wasn't there at all. The state compliance officer picked up next. We have issued a cease and desist order against all current HOA board operations effective immediately. An independent trustee will be assigned to manage the HOA's finances until a new election can be held under court supervision. All fines, citations, and suspensions issued without due process in the past 24 months are nullified. I leaned over to Brenda. That include my fishing fine? She didn't laugh. Neither did I, the AG rep continued. As of this morning, Miss Ellerton was taken into custody by federal agents on charges of wire fraud, embezzlement, and criminal conspiracy. Additional charges may be pending based on the results of the ongoing financial audit. Someone in the back let out a low whistle. A woman near the front visibly exhaled, as if she'd been holding her breath for 5 years. Brent stood up then slowly, like his legs weren't entirely sure they wanted to be part of him anymore. I didn't know she was stealing, he said. The room stayed silent. I signed what I was told were standard disbursements. She said we were catching up on deferred maintenance billing. I didn't think to check. The AG rep didn't blink. You had a fiduciary duty to verify all expenditures. Ignorance does not exempt you from liability. You're facing civil penalties and potential criminal charges. He sat back down. The hearing recessed after that, but the real fallout was just beginning. News vans were parked outside the clubhouse by afternoon. HOA members were being interviewed on camera, some angry, some tearful. A few were just relieved to finally understand why their dues kept climbing while the roads got worse and the community pool stayed green. That night, a special town hall was held in the same building. Not run by the HOA, what was left of it, but by the county trustee temporarily overseeing operations. She was a no-nonsense woman named Aileen Price, who looked like someone who could balance a budget with one hand while fixing a leaky faucet with the other. We're implementing a full audit of all HOA policies, she said. We're also creating a homeowner advisory council to review all future spending. And yes, she nodded toward me without smiling, we will be revisiting the community charter to include mandatory transparency clauses. Brenda raised her hand. What about elections? Aileen nodded. Within 60 days, anyone in good standing may run. And I encourage you to think seriously about who you want overseeing your money. After the meeting, people approached me not with suspicion or judgment, but with respect. A tall man in a faded veteran's hat shook my hand and said, "About time someone stood up to those crooks." A woman in a wheelchair said, "They cited me last year for not repainting my porch. I couldn't afford it and they threatened a lien. I'm glad someone fought back." I didn't say much. I just listened. That was what people needed. Within a week, Brent resigned from the board and entered a plea agreement in exchange for cooperation. He handed over emails, spreadsheets, even handwritten notes. Naomi had given him notes that detailed how to doctor invoices and keep things clean on paper. Cass told me the U.S. Attorney's Office was finalizing charges that could land her in federal prison for over a decade. Meanwhile, I helped draft a proposal for the new advisory council. Brenda agreed to chair it, and several other residents volunteered to help. For the first time in years, the HOA budget was posted publicly, every line item, every contract, open for review. And when the new elections were held, not a single old board member ran. Not one. I didn't run either. I had no interest in power, just peace. A month later, I was back on my dock. This time, I wasn't interrupted, no clipboard, no threats. Just the morning sun and the sound of water lapping against the wood. A kid from down the road rode up on his bike and stopped near the edge of the grass. "Mr. Rusk," he said. I turned. "My dad says you fixed the HOA," I chuckled. "Nah. I just reminded them who the neighborhood really belongs to." He nodded, then pointed to my fishing rod. "You catch anything?" "Not yet," I said, "but I've got time." He rode off and I cast my line again. The lake was quiet, the sky cloudless, and for the first time since I moved in, the water felt like it reflected something honest. Not just peace, but the kind that's earned. The kind that comes when you stand your ground, even when the people in power tell you not to. And this time, no one was watching me from behind a clipboard.